idea of retirement isn't really something that is part of First Nations culture in my experience. In your lifetime, in many of the cultures, you receive 4 names and they mark your journey in your life. And the final name you get is when you become an elder, and this might happen when you become a grandparent, because again, your role changes in the community. The role changes from provider to teacher. So you are no longer maybe fishing or hunting so much as you are teaching the next generation all the things they need to know about the cultural protocol associated with those things. So your role in the community subtly changes, but your knowledge is always supported, and your guidance is always received in a good way, all of those sorts of things. So more or less the community starts to look after you, and the knowledge you bring to your community is always appreciated and, like I say, recognized. So it's not really retirement so much as it is a change of roles in the community.
We're still involved in the community and everywhere, and today is, I guess with our people, it's, you never ever really, I think, use the word retire, because you're expected as elders to still be active in the community. So I guess we just don't retire until we can't move anymore.
I don't think that I never heard my grandfather talk about retirement. I never heard him say, well, I'm too old to fish now, so I'm not going to fish anymore. There just wasn't that idea that you had to quit working because you were of a certain age. You fished until you were well enough, you owned a boat until you were well enough to look after that boat and to be independent. And so where I come from, there was no concept of traditional retirement, because I can honestly say I never ever heard the word retirement, and I didn't hear, I really didn't become familiar with the word retirement until I came to the city, and I heard all this about retirement and so on. And so for me it was like, well, what is retirement? What does that mean? Because it wasn't something that was a common word for us.
She and I joke around and say, you don't quit working, you just don't get paid anymore. So I think that's the reality is that a lot of our people, and it's not a one-off, it's not a rare thing to see people volunteering until their dying days, and as long as they can get to the meeting, they're going to do it. And our Elders Council is a testament to that it is looked at differently, and it's seen as a sort of an honored role.
Love. They're so rich in love and knowledge. They're so wise, and I have a hard time figuring out. I don't know. Elder to me is more of a feeling than it is an age. I feel like that's what's really. I'm having a hard time grasping what age people become elders, because I think it's more of just like a feeling and a way of being than a classification. I look at my grandmother and my great-grandparents. I only knew my great-grandfather, and I look at my aunts and uncles now who are reaching that elder age, and they all have so much to offer me, and they're just such a great wealth of love and support. I just feel such a strong connection to them.
It's like when I lived in Masset, we used to go out and get deer all the time. We get far more deer than we ever needed. And we would always drop, I'd get the hides off these deer, but we drop the carcasses off at older people's houses. So they get a nice deer, it's all skinned and it's ready to go and everything else, because they're maybe not going out and hunting as much. But their families, the folks up there take care of their families. Like they come and find the older folks. They'll come bring them food, and they always bring them to social events. Mm-hmm. You go get them, and we make sure there's tables there for the elders, or they're sitting either with their families, or we have elders tables, and they're still held up.
I think I don't know that there was such a planning for it. The people it was just a natural progression of life. We look after babies, we look after young folks that are making, that are becoming young adults. We look after that. We look after when two young people are coming together to build another family. We look after that. We look after people who are elders now and are not, like Glenn was saying, able to go hunting and fishing anymore. But they made their contribution to the community. It's almost like a barter system. I'm the best basket. This is not true, by the way. I might be the best basket weaver in the village. So I'm not weaving just for my family. I'm weaving for everybody in the community, because I know there's going to be fish that shows up on my doorstep, or somebody's done something else for me. That's just the way the communities work. Everybody giving, everybody helping each other all the time.
I witnessed that with my own mother. Going around checking the elders to see, especially if they live by themselves, and she would go and check if they would need somebody to light their fire and cook them breakfast, or see that their laundry got done and stuff. And she would take me along with her, and she would get me to go out and pick up the twigs to start a fire in their house and get their breakfast going and stuff. So just by example that I learned to, be helpful. And the rest of the community was like that. If some of the men were down the beach cutting wood, the others would stop by and join them and help them with they didn't have to be paid. It was just part of our village life. You helped each other, and didn't expect payment. You just did it, looked after each other, and so that you never needed welfare. Everybody was helping each other as they saw the need to help each other. At least that's what I witnessed at my village, just going around helping each other, and and that's what made the village function. Yeah, that way. Yeah, it was a good way. Yeah.
We could have a big salmon here, and the first thing if we had too much, we'd look around for a neighbor to share it with.
In the old days, people just took care of each other. You got old. I remember my auntie taking care of my great-grandmother. She lived at her house till she died when she was about 95, and we just took care of our old people, and I don't think people thought about that. Our people always respect elders, and you don't see that in the larger society where old people are just left on their own.
Our purpose is to always prepare for the future generations. It's not to use everything up, and we're always looking towards the next generation. So our elders were always relaying that information to us. Only take what you need. It's not necessary to take everything, all the deer out of a meadow or all the fish out of a lake. You just take enough to feed your family and to support, until the next hunting and gathering season. The elders always relayed that information, reminded us, and they did it a lot of times through storytelling. So you might be sitting intently listening to a story, and then it's not until after the story that you realize you've been taught something. So it's such a gentle approach to learning how to be a good person in your community, basically.
I mean, if you look at traditional family structures, the adults really didn't have much time to raise their children. And so who do they rely on? Their parents, who are elders. And so there's this really strong connection between grandparents and grandchildren, great-grandparents and grandchildren. And so I think that their role really is to connect with the rest of the community and be that key of wisdom, and knowing how to do things right and live in a good way. I think that's what elderhood looks like to me in Indigenous contexts, is that you're still contributing. Your work's not done.
And when I came out here, actually, particularly in terms of working on the West Coast, being a prairie Indian and coming out to the West Coast and working with people out here, and most of the contact I had with people on Vancouver Island, so Kwakwaka'wakw or Nuu-chah-nulth, Coast Salish. And what I found is that what it was in the past, particularly out here, because of the abundance of the ocean, people prepared for winter. It was not about monetary, it was more around food, gathering and preparing for something like akapotlatch, which I think is a sign of richness, I guess, in some sense, because the societies out here had the ability to do that. They were able to celebrate by hosting potlatches and inviting communities to be part of that potlatch. It blew me away, and watching and seeing that, even the potlatches today. But again, food was aplenty. People had always lots to eat. They always prepared for the winter season, stuff like that. That was the thing that I was impressed by, what happened out here.
I think the other side of our economy that changed was around the concept of wealth. Bruce talked a little bit about the potlatch system. Wealth was never determined by how much you had, it was by how much you gave away. So I think there's that mentality, that concept has stuck with us, that money isn't something that's to be kept. Money is you're supposed to take your abundance and give it away, and it will come back to you someday.
What I loved about the stories that my dad shared was how creative my grandparents were and Stephen Cook. And one of the things they did was, when they were working, it was like, how are we going to be economically independent when, number one, we're not allowed to commercial fish, and if we did they weren't allowed to have a boat with a motor in it, which was part of the act, so they would have to paddle down to Robson Bight or any of those areas down there, or to our camp. How could they commercial fish and make any kind of money? So as my dad said, they made my Papa Cook made friendships with the Japanese, and can't remember their names, but my dad still has them. And what they would do is the Japanese and my great grandfather would work in a saltery, and they would sell all their fish. And then the Japanese friend of Papa's would get paid, but he'd pay my great grandfather underneath the table, and he accumulated that enough to buy some land over on Vancouver Island. Kind of did it all under the guise, because Native people could not do business, could not do loans, could not be enterprising. So he managed to work around the system, which was awesome, and then accumulated enough that they sold that little piece of property on Vancouver Island, probably for some of the logging. And that's when my grandfather, later on, when the law was lifting a little bit, started to create and buy commercial fish boat, and started to build the Cook fleet into 6 boats.
People lived here for 20 to 100,000 years with these values in place, everybody looking after everybody else, everybody realizing from a very young age what their roles and responsibilities were in a community, and functioning quite nicely.
When I envision what a retirement life would look like for somebody living on reserve, I envision peacefulness. I envision happiness, being surrounded by family, being surrounded by community, being surrounded by other elders. So I have a vision of what it would look like, but I don't necessarily know how we can get to that place.
Anything that helps build up our communities, even in urban areas, and bringing the cultural aspect more into what we're doing. I think that's really important. It's not only the economics, but it's all of it together.